welcome to What's Your Story. Thank you for joining us. We have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Carolyn Hamilton, and some people who live in Las Vegas will definitely know who she is because she owned a big advertising agency here in Las Vegas for many, many years, and then she moved off to Ecuador. So we have a lot of things to talk to her about today. Welcome, Carolyn. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Judy. This was a delightful and surprising and wonderful invitation.
Well, you know, the fact that you're in Ecuador and I'm here in Las Vegas and we can do this is so exciting. You know, Zoom has got me really excited that we can have all kinds of guests we wouldn't normally have if they had to come to the studio. So I'm just delighted to have you. There's so much about you I want to tell people because, you know, you were in that advertising agency with the original Mad Men, or admin, or whatever they were, but that was an interesting time here in Vegas. And you're quite the illustrator. You studied illustration in the university, I believe. You went to, what, Antioch University?
I got a degree in liberal arts from Antioch University, Seattle. But prior to that, I got a 2-year degree in commercial art. That's what they called it before graphic design at Los Angeles Trade and Technical College.
Ah, okay. So your artwork is amazing. I mean, I know that all of that graphic was not the same as the artwork that you do because you do beautiful drawings and watercolors, and you just brought out another coloring book.
Yes, it's called Color Caro. Caro is my art name. When I write, I'm Carolyn V. Hamilton. When I paint, I'm Caro, C-A-R-O. And so this book is called Color Caro's Fabulous Fashion Hats. I love hats, so
Yes.
why not?
Yes, I know we both do. Back in the old day, we used to wear a lot of them, both of us. So, I
Yeah.
mean, after years and years of being a fabulous artist and a very successful businesswoman, what made you decide to start writing books?
That's such a loaded question, Judy, because I want to give you the Cliff Notes version, not the whole memoir version. In 1999, with my then husband, Court Proctor, we joined the Peace Corps, and we ended up in a little uh, Indian village on the edge of the rainforest in the Amazon. And no heat, no electricity, no communication, nothing. And I spent a lot of time during that first year in the jungle laying in my hammock reading books, novels. And I thought, you know, I've got great ideas. I could write a novel. Why can't I do this? And so I decided that when I came out of the Peace Corps, I wanted to write a book. And I was going to write a romance because how hard can that be, right? But I discovered then, I joined the Cactus Rose romance group, writing group in Vegas, and made wonderful friends. But I learned romance writers are very, very picky. So, and the story I wanted to write was about Elizabeth Sampson, is a historic figure in Suriname, where we were in the Peace Corps. And I really wanted to tell her story because she was the first black woman in the 18th century in the country to get legal permission to marry a white man. And her story was just amazing. And I was going to write it as a romance. And then I decided, no, it's a much more serious story and it really needs to be told in a more detailed way. So I did a lot of research and ended up writing my first book, Elizabeth Sampson, Forbidden Bride, which was published in 2004. And it's a true story based on a historical story based on this woman's life, and it has a trick ending.
Oh, you're not going to share that with us, huh?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you that. No. But I will tell you, she spent her entire adult life and much of her fortune because she was a very wealthy plantation owner with hundreds of slaves of her own. Slavery was not about color. And she spent a lot of energy and a lot of money and decades to change that law.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? I love
Just
stories of,
marry a guy.
Yeah, yeah. I love the stories of what people have overcome and, you know, what their lives are all about. But you've written several other books since then.
I did subsequently write a romance because I had met some people in the Amazon and some eco adventure type people, and I thought, well, they'd make a great couple for a romance. So I did write a romance called Hard Amazon Rain. And then I wrote a couple of novels based in Las Vegas. And then I started writing some nonfiction books. I wrote an editing book for fiction writers and one for memoir writers. And then I went on to write uh, through the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I wrote Cork's autobiography, and then my first memoir, Coming to Las Vegas. And a couple years ago, I published my most recent memoir, which is called Help, I Married a Comedian.
Well, let's just clarify something for the audience for a minute. You said you wrote Cork's biography. Now, Cork is Cork Proctor, your husband, and he was a comic here in Las Vegas for many, many years, a headliner.
50
And
decades, not 50, 5 decades.
yeah, so he was here for quite a
Well,
long
like,
time. And he's quite a character. He's very interesting himself. I ought to do a show on him because he is such a wonderful person. Um, but you were a Playboy bunny, and a lot of people don't know that about you. And your book about you coming to Las Vegas mentions that, right?
I mention it just as an aside because when the MGM Grand opened, it was like, oh, this is a credit. Well, I've been a cocktail waitress, so this is a good. But actually, that interview was very interesting. I remember the guy's name, Tony Diorio. Nice, nice, sweet man. And he was doing these interviews at the convention authority, and everybody was, I mean, that was the thing to do, go over there and apply and see what happens. So I wanted to be in the graphic arts department, so I went over to apply for something in advertising or marketing or something like that because I had done that in Los Angeles as well. I had worked at an ad agency in LA. And so I filled all that out, and then at the bottom where it says other, like other things you've done, I wrote Playboy Bunny and a couple other simple things. So Tony zeroed right in on that, and he said, he says, Carol, you don't want this job in marketing and advertising. He says, but he says, you don't have a chance. Those jobs are all juiced in. They're already taken. And I see here that you were a Playboy bunny. So I'm going to put you down for a cocktail waitress job. And I thought, hopefully by the time the hotel opens, I'll be able to be back in LA. So I don't care. So I said, just put me down. Whatever you want, Tony, is fine with me. And that's how I got hired.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Well, you've written books in so many different genres. Do you have a favorite genre?
Well, I really like memoir. And so I've built a career since those books were published, coaching aspiring memoir writers. And I have a Facebook group called Aspiring Memoir Writers, which anyone can apply to join, and it has over 2,000 members now. They're very active and very helpful with each other. And there are just so many stories out there. Everybody's really had an amazing life, even if they think it was boring and nobody would be interested. They've had challenges they've overcome. They've had great trips that they've taken. They've had great careers that are maybe unusual, and all of those things make great memoirs. So I really like. I read a lot of memoirs now, and that's probably my favorite genre. Will I write another memoir? I don't know. I've thought about doing something related to the world of Mad Men because I've got some funny advertising stories, and that's basically how I came to write Coming to Las Vegas, because I just wanted to tell a bunch of funny stories about working at the MGM. So I might do that about advertising, but it's kind of low on the
On the
task
totem
list
pole
right
right
now.
now. Yeah, yeah. What advice would you give to someone who would like to write a memoir?
My first piece of advice, and I've been thinking about writing a short book on how to do this, 100 pages, because Amazon has a new category called short reads, so why not? But I would say start with a timeline. Write down every single thing that happened to you and when and where it happened to you that you think you might want to include in your story. And that's a good beginning. Just start this list, this timeline, and if you can think in terms of scenes, like if it was made into a movie, what would the first scene be? But don't worry about the organization or where your book's going to start or who's going to read it, how you're going to sell it, how many chapters it should be. None of that. Don't think about any of that. Just start with a timeline of events.
And you're saying that a memoir doesn't have to start at the beginning of your life up till now. You can pick specific parts of your life to write a memoir. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of confusion about that. People think a memoir is your whole life story. I was born in Illinois to parents who worked in the coal and whatever. But it isn't. An autobiography, which is Cork's book, My Mind is an Open Mouth, he starts with he grew up in Wisconsin and all that kind of stuff. So his story, and he ends it when we went into the Peace Corps. And that's really an autobiography because he's telling it first person, but it's his whole life. A memoir is still first person, but it's just a certain period of your life. So, for instance, Coming to Las Vegas covers a 3-year period of when I worked at the Grand, and then Help, I Married a Comedian covers about 35 years of our relationship.
35 years, that's a long relationship.
Whoever thunk it?
So, what could you tell us about, I think you have a class coming up, don't you, where you're going to be teaching memoir?
I created this last fall because what I've discovered is that aspiring memoir writers have two concerns. One is, where do I start? And the second one is, what if they sue me? Those are their two main concerns. So I created this 8-week class and last fall and taught it then. And it's called Memoir to Legacy 101. And it's all about getting started and completing your rough first draft in 8 weeks. This is doable. Of about 40 to 50,000 words minimum. And it was very successful, so I'm teaching it again in the spring, in February, and I probably will teach it again in the fall. My plan is 2 times a year, spring and fall. So in the summer I might consider, but I don't know yet, but probably just 2 times a year.
Yeah, yeah. But that's a good opportunity. I was in a memoir writers group a couple years ago, and it was really fun because the group would read a couple pages. Each of us would show up and read a couple pages, and we learned so much about each other, and a lot of healing went on. Do you find that with memoirs, that people who've been through difficult times, they have healing as a result?
Yes, we know that writing can be very cathartic, and so we know that that's true in journal writing and things like that. So for a lot of memoir writers, that's part of the process, is getting this story out there and sharing it with other people in a way that can be helpful to other people. But also in the writing process, things come up for them that they didn't expect. And so sometimes in the coaching process, I feel like I've become kind of a therapist as well as a writing coach. And a lot of people do need a little help getting past, especially writing about something that was extremely painful.
Yes, yes. But I think memoirs are so important for sharing about our lives with the people who love us. I know that I used to just try to get my mother to record her life stories because she had so many interesting stories, and she never did because people are intimidated by just talking to a tape recorder or something. So I think there's got to be a better way of getting people to get that information out of themselves and down on paper.
Well, some people need to be interviewed because they're not going to pick up the recorder and do it on their own because they don't know where to start. They don't know, maybe they don't know how to turn on the recorder. They don't really, especially people of a certain age, and the technology can be a little challenging these days. So I think the interview process is the best. That's how we did Cork's book. We just He was interviewed by Joyce Moore, who was with Special Collections at UNLV, and she just asked him questions and he started talking and telling stories. And then occasionally she would interrupt for clarification. And they ended up with, when it was transcribed, about 150,000 words. And then my job was to turn it into a book that was only about 60,000 words. So that was a challenge, but it was easy to do in the sense that I already had so much material to work with. And a lot of those 150,000 words was Cork repeating himself. And that's fine. But the technology today is so great. There's a website called otter.ai. Otter like Flipper the animal or whatever.
OTTER?
OTTR.ai.
Oh,
And
OTTR.ai. Okay.
And it's a transcription program. So you talk and it transcribes and creates a written document. And you get, with the free membership, you get up to 10 hours free every month.
Wow.
That's another reason why, if you're going to do that, you want to have an outline so you can think about, well, now to this month for my 10 hours, I'm going to talk about this, 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 and this. So you're organized going in.
That is very good.
Really,
you see, I'm taking notes like crazy as you talk. I mean, it's amazing. Here I'm interviewing you and I'm writing down everything that you say so I don't forget, so I can just go back and work on my memoir, because people keep encouraging me to do it and I haven't done it.
Yeah. I mean, just running a modeling agency in the 70s in Vegas with the mentality of the culture in the 70s, that alone could be one memoir.
Yeah, I was mainly thinking about writing about living in Africa, But
There's book number 2, or reverse them if you want. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Living in Africa. I always remember that you used to say to me, when I'm in South Africa, people say, "Oh my God, the United States, aren't you afraid to be there? It's so dangerous." And when you're in the US, people would say, "Oh my God, South Africa, aren't you afraid? It's so dangerous."
Yeah, they did. They did.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm sure that now that you live in Ecuador, people probably say the same thing to you, don't they?
Yeah, they are horrified. So, my maid came to me and said she read this terrible story in the newspaper about a child in the US who got a hold of his father's gun and shot his little brother. And she was horrified. And how did I tell her that happens all the time?
Yeah. Yeah,
US.
I know
All these
this is
shootings.
not, this interview
can't
with
explain it.
you, for me, it's about your writing, because you're my hero, and or my shiro, I should say, and I just want to be a writer like you when I grow up. But I also want to ask you too, because you live in Ecuador, and as you know, I'm fascinated with living in other countries, and so I want you to tell us, is it a cool place to live? Do you like being there? Is it easy for you in Cork to make friends and be around people? Do you speak the language? Tell us a bit about being there.
Well, I've been here 10 years. Best move I ever made. Because at the time that I decided to move here, I was, this is such a, it's another long story. I want to tell you the Cliff Notes version. But I was job hunting in Seattle in 2011, 12. And let me tell you, age discrimination is alive and well.
Oh, I
And I
know it.
thought, I don't want to do this. I want to go somewhere. I want to just explore my creativity, my writing, my painting. That's all I want to do. I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I don't want to, and it's expensive. And so I decided to emigrate to a place where I could live simply on my Social Security. And Ecuador made the most sense because it had the lowest income requirement. It's on the American dollar. It's 110 voltage, so you don't need any of those little plug-in converters.
Yes.
And you have to have a round trip ticket to get into the country. So I thought, well, if I don't like it, I can always come back and then figure out what I'm going to do. So but I came prepared to like it. And I think that's part of success at anything is the mindset. And you know all about this from your public speaking and your motivational things. It's all about mindset. People said, well, gee, I hope you like it. Listen, I wouldn't be going if I wasn't planning to like it.
Oh,
And I
that's
love,
interesting that you say that because I think a lot of people don't think I'm going to plan to like it, whether it's a job or whether it's moving to another country, or they're just waiting for the next shoe to fall rather than planning that
yeah.
mindset. I
And
love
I've
that,
made
Carolyn.
great friends here. I did think, now here's a couple of things that were different. I thought that I would have mostly Ecuadorian friends and not too many gringos because I had heard bad things about gringos and I didn't want to be friends with them. It's turned out to be just the opposite. I have some wonderful Ecuadorian friends, but I would say the greater majority of my friends are North Americans and from the US and
Yes.
Canada.
Yeah.
And and then I have a friend from Holland and other places like that as well. I don't go out much actually since the pandemic started, and it's very strict here in Ecuador. Something like 90% of the population is vaccinated. We've had a mask in public and social distancing mandate since this whole thing started, and Ecuadorians are very agreeable. So we don't have a lot of issues here with this. The only people who really scream and holler about it are the North Americans
Of course.
from and so don't even get me started there. We had a couple of really active writing groups here before the pandemic hit, and I would encourage anybody, no matter where they live, to join a writing group because you know from your own experience too how powerful and supportive that can be.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I have to admit that I think my memoir writing group that I was in up in the state of Washington was much more supportive and open than a couple of the groups I've belonged to here. Here I felt a little bit of competition, where up there I just felt like people were helping each other.
Well, I think that goes, and we could talk all day about this too. I think that goes to a different mindset. Let's just leave it at this. Different parts of the United States support different mindsets.
Oh, that's a very good point. I like that.
And
I like
I
that.
think that could have something to do with it.
Yeah. So what's
And
next?
I see that here in Cuenca too. Uh, People have different mindsets depending on what part of the United States they came from or whether they came from Canada. So US people are concerned about different things than Canadian people are.
Interesting.
Go figure.
Yeah, yeah. So what's next for Carolyn Hamilton? You're teaching this memoir class.
And well, first of all, if anybody wants any more information about any of this stuff, just Google me, Carolyn V, as in victory, Hamilton, although V was for Vots, my maiden name. But yeah, you'll find, and if they're all interested in memoir, be sure to join our Facebook group, Aspiring Memoir Writers.
Yeah, I made a note of that. I'm going to tell my people to do that too.
Yeah, and I'm really easy to find and connect with on the internet.
Okay.
What's next for me? I am on my bucket list for 2022, if you will, is to set up an artist gallery online. to sell
Ooh,
prints of my artwork.
I like
So
it.
that's something that I want to do. I've not really pursued selling art online, and from what I've been reading, art print sales are really up because of the pandemic, because people are staying home. They're doing home-like things, such as redecorating the living room.
Yes.
And so I'm intrigued with how that'll work.
You know, I wrote a book about that, and there are over 200 websites where you can sell your art. Do you know that? So,
I don't doubt it. The
so
company that I'm considering, the company I'm going to go with, because I've already committed, is called artstorefronts.com.
yeah, I'm familiar with them. They're quite good.
Well, they have quite an interesting marketing program. So they don't just help you set up your website. They provide a lot of training on selling art, and I think that's going to be really valuable.
Oh, I think it will be too. All right. So we
They're
are,
very clear that if you're not willing to get out and sell, and the same thing is with books and novels and courses, whatever it is, if you're not willing to get out and market it and sell it, nothing's going to happen.
you're exactly right. Thank you for saying that, because that's what I tell my students all the time. And especially the coaching clients I have that say, well, you know, I want to do speaking, but nobody calls me. Well, pick up the phone. You know, what's wrong with you? You can call those people. So, you know, we have to do it ourselves. If we're going to be successful in life, we have to do it. Nobody else is going to come along and say, oh, let's sell you, you know, let's make Judy Mario a star. They're not going to do that.
No,
Yeah.
no. And sell doesn't have to be a four-letter word.
No,
It's all about telling stories and talking to people. That's all it is.
that could be
And
another whole course.
creating and branding. Now they call it branding.
Yes, yes.
Just getting out there and being known.
You are
But you
so,
have first you have to leave the house.
or get on the internet, one of the two.
Oh yeah, that's true. Now you don't have to leave the house.
Yeah, so it's been wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for this. And I hope we can have you back on the show again sometime.
I'd love to. I'd love to. It's always fun talking to you, Judy. Anything I can do to help you, just let me know.
Thank you. This is a real pleasure. And thank you to those of you at home who have been with us for this half hour. We really appreciate your attendance, and we hope you'll join us for our next session.